Exploring this topic a little bit over the last couple months of trauma-informed leadership. And so I wanted to unpack a little bit of that and just kind of think out loud with some of you on what trauma-informed leadership is. And in that conversations with some folks, we've joked around about, well, there's also trauma-induced leadership. And trauma-induced leadership, a lot of us have experienced before. But trauma-informed leadership, what's it all about? So let's dive in a little bit to what trauma is, and maybe a little bit on my background getting into understanding more about trauma through adoption and being around, which put me on a pathway to understand trauma more, and have also I serve on a nonprofit that focuses on recovery and serving and developing folks that are in recovery and getting them to the next level. So I've been diving into trauma quite a bit, and probably one of the biggest takeaways for me in diving into trauma is that we are all on the trauma spectrum. It's not like there's people who have had trauma and people who haven't. We have all done it. And what trauma does, though, is kind of like watching a sitcom. If you've ever watched a sitcom where everything is exaggerated, but it's so true, like that's what makes it so funny, is that it's truth but lived out loud. If you watch Everybody Loves Ray or shows like that, like how many people say, that's my family, when you watch a sitcom like that, and everybody's family is clearly different, but they hit on the truths of it, but they do it in a very loud way. And so trauma, one of the main things that trauma does is it lowers a survival threshold that we all have. When we feel threatened, when we feel unsafe, the amygdala starts firing. The amygdala is that thing that says you're about to die, you're unsafe, you need to protect yourself, and so you either need to run away, flight, or you need to fight, or play possum and freeze. And so it's these three F's that typically go into this when we get into survival mode. And we would joke around, because there's three F's in there, that when somebody is in survival mode, they are effing, right? So we don't like being around effing employees. We don't like to be around effing kids. We're like, hey, there's an effing kid at home. It's like, oh, what are we going to do with our effing kid? And because I don't like being around effing kids, so that's our a way to have a little humor around that, because there's not really much funny going on when somebody's in survival mode, because it's very destructive around them. There's so much needing to protect themselves that they are either fighting people who love them the most, or they need to work with the most, or they're running away, they're dysfunctional, and so it's actually not a very funny thing. So it's good to be able to bring a little bit of humor into that. But why do we get into, and this is in the context of leadership, when we are leading somebody who gets into the survival mode, it's difficult. Things happen, mistakes happen, relationships are burnt, performance is not happening. And there's a brain science reason why this happens. Our prefrontal cortex is this part of the front of the brain where our executive function happens. Is where our decision making, our high level problem solving, creativity, all those things happen in this prefrontal cortex. And when the amygdala is firing, which is at the base of the brain, when that's firing, the prefrontal cortex shuts down. It says, it's not important to solve problems right now, it's important to fight right now, okay? And if you've ever noticed this, when you get frustrated, when you get anxious, when you get in this place and you're in an argument with somebody and you can't think of anything to say, you walk away, it's like, oh man, it would have been really good to say this, right? All the words start flowing, the brain starts coming back online, but in that heat of the moment, we can't think very well. And when we're in an unsafe situation, when our teams or when our organization is chronically in an unsafe situation, they're not going to be solving hard problems. They're not going to be working hard. They're not going to be able to regulate their emotions. It's just a very dysfunctional environment. But the reality is, so many of our workplaces, they cry the hallmark of being a high stress or a high anxious or an unsafe place, and making safe spaces gets a bad rap, and for good reason, because sometimes just making a safe space is more of a cop-out than actually addressing the difficulty of tough relationships and things. But so I just want to talk probably this first part of leading, trauma-informed leadership. If we understand just that there exists this threshold of survival, both in our team and in us, then just starting with awareness that it exists and what are some of the factors that cross us over into that, we can understand a lot better on how to keep from going over that and how to get back into an unflipped brain. You know, we have the saying, somebody flipped their lid. I think that's a great way to say it. Somebody's flipped their lid, it's like prefrontal cortex is done and that lid is flipped and there's no like logic, there's no talking to them. So understanding that our teams all have this threshold and any one of our individuals, the entire team, can be cross over that threshold and be in survival mode. If you think about, even if it's a low-level survival mode, is that a recipe for high performance in a team? When you're surviving, where's your focus? Is it on others in the team or is it on self? It's on self, right? So you're like, here's my pep talk for the team today. I want everybody to think about themselves, all right? What's best for you, and that's going to make the team work well, right? That said no coach ever, right? Said no coach ever is coming and said this is the way that we're going to win this. It's always been, hey, we go out there, we're going to give everything for each other. We're going to kind of lay our lives down, serve each other, think about each other, who's open, that on the sports field and in the workplace. And so survival mode is like a death knell for high-performing teams. We won't have high-performing teams when a good number of the team members are in survival mode. So what are some of the things that cross us over that threshold? Well, there's real threats, right? Real dangers that can do that. There are even some simple environmental factors like noise, sensory types of things. All right, when the lights are super bright, when they're, and this is especially for somebody who's been in trauma, where the sensory things can be exaggerated for them. Temperature, let's see. So you've got sight, touch, temperature, sense, all the other sensory things in there, which is one reason why as we do more co-working and open workflows in offices, that often you'll see white noise generators in there. Why would you have white noise generators in an office space? Well, when you've got people talking in there, if you've ever been in a crowded, this is called the crowded party scenario, lots of voices going on. The brain is amazing using 2 ears. You can hone in on one voice out of all those voices and filter out everything using the phasing and things for the brain to hone into one voice. And you can do that. But have you ever noticed that after you've been doing that for a while, you get tired? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get tired from doing it because it takes energy to do that. The brain is working hard to do that. And so when we bring in some white noise, like working on the highway side of this building, you don't hear those voices as much. So the brain doesn't have to work as hard to ignore things or to focus on what it needs to focus on. So there's some environmental things that we can do. But just as important, maybe even more important than that, our ability to regulate our emotions or to regulate and keep from going over that threshold in the survival mode are dependent on our rest and on our blood sugar levels. So there's some very practical physiological things that we can do. And recognizing this in our team and co-regulating with them, or specifically in ourselves. And so recognizing, hey, it's time to eat, or it's time to eat well, or it's time to take a break. Those are important to know. Hey, we've probably all noticed when we're hungry, when we're at the end of our day, it's much harder to not lose our temper. It's much harder to push through on performance. It's much harder to say no to impulses, right? So our ability to stay away from crossing over that threshold gets harder and harder when we're tired and when we're hungry. And that's true in our teams, and it's true in ourselves. So those are a few of just the practical tips of recognizing, hey, there is a threshold, and there are some very practical things to learn more about it. And maybe just a side note. Well, let me move into this next piece. So, as leaders, when we are leading, we should be the last ones to lose it. We need to be the last ones that ever allow our lids to flip. We need to be the most regulated. We need to be the most in control of ourselves. Can't control anybody else, although we can help with the environment and help co-regulate with others. But we have to be the last ones to lose it. And that means we need to know ourselves really well. I need to know what my buttons are. I need to know I need to know where my threshold, when I'm getting close to it, what are some of the indicators for me that says I'm getting close to it, and to keep myself, because I can't be the one who can't solve problems. I can't be the one who can't think critically in situations, especially where there's high pressure. And so I need to know myself well. But it's also, for myself, it's also like going to the gym. Every time we get close to this threshold and as an individual, we can practice what are the things that I can do to get away from this threshold, walk away from the ledge, get back into it. Breathing exercises, right? Can I just take a deep breath? That does it, right? That helps us get back. Can I take a time out? Can I do that? Can I walk away when everything in me says, I need to fix this right now? Can I just walk away and take a break and come back to it? Am I disciplined to for myself, but then also to come back around and fix some things? Because we don't want to just walk away from a problem and just leave it, right? That's not what we want to do, because now that's escaping, right? We don't want to do that. But if we need to take a break and get away from a problem, come back to it. Those are the things that we need to do well as a leader. So just to recap, and I'm just going to unplug there. This is kind of a meandering talk, because I'm still forming a lot of these thoughts on trauma-informed leadership. But one, we all have this threshold that we cross into survival mode, and we become an effing person, right? And we don't want to become an effing person that goes into fight, flight, or freeze. Nor do we want to be around effing employees, right? We don't want to do that. And you could say the joke, like if you don't have any effing employees around you and the team members, maybe you may be that one who loses it all the time. But that's just a funny joke there. Know that you have a threshold. Know your buttons first. You need to know yourself first. What buttons push you over that? What are the other factors? Am I sensitive to noise? Am I sensitive to environmental things? Am I taking care of my nutrition? Am I taking care of my rest? And I need to be doing that first for me, and then I can co-regulate with the rest of my team a whole lot better.